Now, Deputy Joan Collins, please.
Thanks, Councillor. Minister, the number of renters having to leave their homes is staggering. Last year, 3,038 households renting were served a notice to quit, mainly because the landlord was selling up. This is the highest number of evictions of tenants to take place in a single year since the foundation of the state. And the number of families facing eviction has continued unabated into this year. Renters are living in fear and insecurity, terrified of losing their home and facing the impossible task of finding somewhere else to rent. A quarter of all children are growing up in an insecure private rental sector. That is 281,000 children. For a child, stability and security are fundamental to enable them to develop and grow. I have two examples of families who were in my constituency office last week. There was a young couple with one young child, and they got the go-ahead to self-accommodate. The woman was on the phone, ringing around the hotels around Dublin City. The person, Pat Dunn, the councillor, was on the phone to the family support unit. She eventually got a room that was available, and the family support officer agreed, but the hotel priced the room at €460 a night, without even breakfast, 460. The officer refused to pay that amount of money, said it was above the amount they could afford. Another woman, two teenagers, will be homeless this week. When Councillor Pat Dunn contacted the family support unit, they replied that the person had notified them last month they were eligible for homeless HAP, and the family support unit continued to say that she stated the need for 2 bedrooms. We have advised in emergency accommodation only 1 bedroom will be provided if even one is available on the day, as our service is currently at capacity. There is no availability in the hubs. We have three other families on top of these cases, families resorting to sofa surfing and outstaying their welcome, families splitting up children among friends and family. Minister, the numbers presenting are greater than the numbers leaving the system at the moment. Given the prices and non-availability in hotels, B&Bs, hubs, my fear is we will have families back sleeping in cars or going to guard stations. We do advise people who do come into us before they actually leave to overhold if they have nowhere to go, and that is stressful in itself for families. On the radio, one man said he was advised to go to a Garda station. The housing crisis is scarring a generation of children. Hundreds of thousands of children are growing up in this country not knowing what it is like to live in a stable, secure, safe home. In May last year, official figures showed 928 families and their 2,148 children were homeless. In March this year, 2,811 children, that's a 37% increase, are homeless. It is beyond time for a real housing emergency response from your government. One immediate response is a reinstatement of the eviction ban for 2 years and at a minimum to introduce a rent freeze. And how does your government propose to support these families and resolve the crisis, not in the future but now?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Collins, for raising the issue, and you highlighted a number of individual cases there that underline a real crisis for those individuals and families. And if you want to provide the details of those individual cases to Minister O'Brien, I have no doubt that he will follow up, because while the emergency accommodation system is undoubtedly under strain, emergency accommodation will be found for people who really need it. And I think the real answer for us as a country here is to build more public housing. And that is what we are back to doing now at scale as a country. There will be about 9,000 direct build social houses this year by our councils and our approved housing bodies, and that is what will help to provide permanent homes for people who are currently on the housing list and in some cases, unfortunately, are in emergency accommodation because they are effectively homeless. And it is an absolute priority for government to address that issue. The availability of hotel accommodation at this time, as we all know, is under strain because of various reasons, and the fact that we have accommodated a very large number of refugees who've come to our country fleeing war, which is the right thing to do, and we have obligations to them as well. But it has placed the system under pressure. There can be no question about that. But we are working very closely with a whole range of service providers in this sector and providing a lot of funding to different service providers to ensure that people who are in real need are afforded accommodation into the future. So for us, the key thing here is to make progress on the supply of new homes across all of the different types, because that is ultimately the best way to relieve some pressure in the system. If we're building more homes and we have a flow through of people going from one type of tenure to another, that people on the list are receiving a council home, which are being built now at record numbers, that frees up capacity within the current emergency accommodation system for people who currently do not have accommodation. So we do fully understand the scale of this challenge, which is for so many people now has reached a real crisis point for over 10,000 people in emergency accommodation, and it is our priority to address that by increasing supply, by providing the support from the Exchequer to all of the service providers, to our local authorities, to the approved housing bodies, to the LDA, to provide more cost rental homes, affordable purchase homes and social homes as well. And we are making progress on that front, and I think Minister O'Brien will be laying out again in the days ahead further steps in relation to affordable housing initiatives.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Collins.
Minister, these families are facing this crisis now. People are walking to our constituency office, and I'm sure every other TD is seeing that in their constituency office, where people are coming in with notices to quit, all sorts of problems in relation to housing, and they've been told by the Family Support Unit, the emergency and the emergency accommodation unit, that they're at capacity. They don't have anywhere to put them. Now, either the government gives a direction to the Family Support Unit to pay whatever the hotels want or demand in relation to accommodation, or you suddenly get vacant housing on board tomorrow. This situation is now, here and now. So it can't wait until houses are built in 2 or 3 years' time. In our area, we're waiting for housing to be built in St Mike's Estate. Since 2019 that was raised. We're still waiting for bricks to be put down in the ground. So when you talk about future housing, you're talking about in the future. This is a crisis now in the emergency accommodation, and it needs to be addressed, and your government needs to address it before it gets worse.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. To conclude.
Thank you, Deputy Collins, and it will be addressed. And we acknowledge the strain that is there in relation to the provision of emergency accommodation at this time. I attend all of the Housing Cabinet Committee meetings where we go into the detail on all of the strands of this, and the government is working now collectively using every resource available to us to make sure that accommodation generally is made available to meet all of the needs that are there. So if people need emergency accommodation, they will get the support that they need. We are, as I said, providing a huge amount of support through short-term rent supports. We want to move away from that because we want people to have security of tenure, and we want the state to be getting better value than to be paying hundreds of millions of euro in short-term rental supports. We have to acknowledge that the dearth of rental accommodation is in part because of the number of landlords who have been leaving the system. And we have to ask ourselves collectively, why is it the case that thousands of landlords are making the decision at a time of high rents to get out of the market? And those are questions that need to be answered as well, because we need to have an adequate supply of rental accommodation, which currently is falling. And it falls to us in this House to make decisions that ensure there is a continued adequate supply of rental accommodation in the private market.
Minister.
It's an important part of the overall system.
Now, that concludes Leaders'